My next guest is retired Lieutenant Colonel Jason Pike. He's a decorated combat veteran with 31 years in the U.S. Army. You've authored 3 books, A Soldier Against All Odds, Out of the Uniform Back into Civilian Life, and Leading Through the Crossfire. Jason, I appreciate you joining me here today, and I can't wait to dive into your career as a military officer and all the fun adventures you've been on.
Yes, it is. I was sort of unconventional. I was rogue. I was a character, I guess. And I look back on it in hindsight, I was compensating for a learning disability. I didn't want to tell anybody I had a problem. They kind of knew. A lot of people did know it, the awkwardness and the difference. And so I was a little different, but that's what created such a good story, especially with the soldier against all odds and going through all the ups and downs. And it really came to, I don't even think I've spoken about it, but it really came to just me learning things and processes much differently than other people.
So how did you start out your life? Where were you raised and what got you interested in the military, and when did you sign up?
So I was raised in rural Georgia and South Carolina. My childhood was just ordinary middle to middle class in the suburbs outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I eventually moved into a place called Fingerville, South Carolina. That's not a joke. There's a place called Fingerville. And my life was pretty much the woods and the rural areas. Failed first grade. Reading and writing are my worst subjects, even though I've written 3 books, but I learned how to get help. And sports was out of the question at the time. We loved football and sports, but I developed a bone disease called osteomyelitis. I had many disadvantages, not only academic, but also physical. Pretty much, I knew my life was going to be manual labor of some sort, and that was just accepted. I accepted that. And the teachers, the counselors, my high school counselor told me, don't even go to college. And so this was very known, not only on paper, but also through anecdotes and just looking at my behavior. And that's where I grew up. I went into agriculture. I started work at age of 14 in agriculture. Peaches were king in South Carolina. King was peaches. And that's kind of how my life sort of was guided up in the early years.
Yeah. Nice. So you enlisted in the military and then did some basic training. I watched a little video that said you might have had some trouble.
Oh yeah. So I was not adapting properly. This was back to me not adapting to many things. And in the Army, it was like drinking water out of a damn fire hose to me. And I ended up, the drill sergeant, they pick up on those little nuances of people. And he picked up on me. And at that time, in 1983, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, they had a criminal correctional facility, and I just visited it just months ago. It's now a range controls facility. They don't have it anymore, but I went to a criminal correctional facility. It's kind of like one of those scared straight programs that you send some of the worst privates to get to either break them or to make them into the military. And so he didn't break me. I improved. I think he felt that I improved, and he wanted to work with me after that event. It was a criminal correctional facility. Is for criminals, but I was not a criminal. I was just not adapting properly, and they have a program to go, the military police run it, not the drill sergeants, and they can hurt you. And I made big rocks into small rocks. I did obstacle courses. We just did a wicked amount. It was like day one over again on steroids, a different level of hell. I came out of that facility broken and beaten up, kind of like being traumatized. And then that's where I thought that I could do more than most people.
So they sent you from basic training to that program. Then you get out of there and you got to go back through basic training, or?
Well, yeah, I go back to basic training. I was only there for a day. It was only a hell on wheels program that puts you in a different level of hell that is, I couldn't even talk about it for years. I really couldn't. I was ashamed that I was one of the only ones out of the platoon that went there, but it did improve me according to everybody. I come back. See, I was 17 years old when I went to that facility. I joined when I was 17. And when I was 18, I graduated. I came out of the facility. I graduated basic training. I went into my senior year of high school. See, I was 18. I was a soldier in high school because I had failed the first grade. And so came in with a skin head in 1983, I guess. And then I was a soldier in the National Guard. The reserve forces, that was the less, again, everything was at the bottom. National Guard, they used to call it the no-goes because you don't go anywhere. Or sometimes they call it the nasty girls and things. But we were a military force that was very, very different. Let's just put it that way.
What was your MOS coming into the National Guard?
13 Bravo, Field Artillery, Cannon Caucus.
All right. I was at 88 Mike. I spent 13 years in the National Guard myself. I couldn't quite get past the ASVAB when I was 17 and homeschooled. And, I was having a hard time and they took me in and I had a hard time learning myself. So they scooped me up. I barely passed, got in and, I eventually got my combat deployment and all that stuff out of it. So I finally felt like I was a soldier.
People have asked me, which baffles me. You talked about the ASVAB. I don't know how in the hell I passed the ASVAB. I think I didn't pass. I think they just put me in. I think these numbers. This was National Guard. This ain't active duty. We were sort of a little different. And then with the bone disease, I had osteomyelitis. I lied to the Army, says, I'm fine. I checked all the blocks and I worked on that. So I sort of slimed my way in for the military.
So, I was going to ask if you had to get a waiver or something to get in there. But a lot of the medical issues that people have, they don't necessarily affect you once you get in, or even the ASVAB. I've seen the smartest guys come in and they're the worst soldiers and vice versa. So you're doing National Guard and then you obviously became an officer. You were an enlisted guy when you came in.
I was in the National Guard, enlisted for 4 years. At that same time, I went to junior ROTC and then I applied to go to senior ROTC to get my commission. I went to college. How did you get into college? How did you get in the Army? It goes back to the same. I went to a junior college. I had to prove myself to get worthy to transfer into a more reputable Clemson University. I had to do everything again from the bottom. I was in education. It wasn't engineering, and I was on a 5-year plan or so. But I just did it methodically and slowly. And then I did get my commission out of ROTC at Clemson University.
So what's that like? Obviously, you became a lieutenant colonel, and so you had to work your way through. You were commanding National Guard troops once you became an officer?
Yeah. So what it was in the beginning, I was a platoon leader in the South Carolina National Guard. Mm-hmm. And of course, trouble had a way of following me around. But and then I eventually since I had an ROTC scholarship, I eventually went into active duty and then stayed on active duty. But
okay.
I was both. So I was enlisted National Guard. I was officer National Guard, platoon leader, and some other staff assignments there. And then eventually the Army says, hey, you had a scholarship and you got to come into active duty. And then I went in as a first lieutenant and it went on from there. But there was a whole lot of trouble that I had a lot of self-destructive habits,
Can you speak to any of those or?
Yeah, in the National Guard, I was a lieutenant. I was dating this private, like a babe, blonde babe, when there was not a whole lot of good-looking babes around. I mean, this is 1990, actually, and there's not a lot of, and she was really looking good. I dated her, and I was called into the battalion commander's office, wanting to charge me with fraternization. And I'm a lieutenant trying to speak to a lieutenant colonel and tell him that the regulation doesn't specify. And he said, well, I said, we're part-time soldiers. We're both single, all this stuff. Yeah. I don't care about that. He says, he wrote me a letter to cease. He wrote me an order, personal order to cease and desist with the relationship with the private. And I had to sign the order saying that I understood it. But it was just paperwork to hose me on the evaluation. And he did. But it just goes on, and various things just keep going on. This book, A Soldier Against All Odds, I think it's not just for the military, but I think it's for life in general. That it's a never quit at a different level. That not like I'm not a ranger or special operators, but I just kept going and defying so many odds. And my mom, my family, and friends were like, even my daughter says, "How the hell did you do it, dumbass like you? The dumbass like you do all this stuff." And I'm thinking, you know what? It really was just never quit.
The power of perseverance. So. How long were you in the active duty? I saw a thing where it said you ended up commanding a National Guard troop to go to Afghanistan. How the hell did that happen?
Oh, God. And so, yes, I've been an Army Reserve commander. My father had recently died, and I was picked up to command an Army Reserve outfit out of Perrine Florida, the 452nd. I'm wearing the damn shirt.
All right.
On the it says so the 452nd Medical Detachment was an Army Reserve Medical Detachment out of South Florida, Perrine. Some people who were in personnel, I said, how the hell did that happen? And so they needed an active duty to go down there. And I went down to, and a lot of them were Spanish speakers. And it was trying to get a unit into, so they were all fat and overweight at an extreme level. They couldn't pass the PT test. And they wanted me to put this unit into rotation to go to Afghanistan. There's no way I could have done it. And I said, well, okay. I said, okay, I'm just going to blind eye the PT test because we got to go there. We're not combat troops. And I know you're all overweight. Maybe you'll get fit when you're in Afghanistan. The leaders were, and then I had an executive officer who, I can't make this shit up. So I had an executive officer who was from Puerto Rico. He was a engineer in the Veterans Administration in Miami. Okay. We won't say names. He could not speak English and he did not write English. Okay. He's a captain he's my executive officer. He's a captain in the reserves. Okay. He has 10 years enlisted in the reserves and 10 years as an officer in the reserves, 20 years in the Army Reserves, cannot speak English. He's a Puerto Rican with a bad attitude and he can't write. If he had a great attitude, no problem, man. We'll give you a good award. But no, he had that attitude. So there was, and I had to work. He was undermining the command he was undermining me, and he wanted to be. He wanted to be in charge of me as a captain. I'm thinking, I'm a lieutenant colonel. I think you should have learned your chain of command somewhere. But no, it's like, how in the world? And so, but it was bizarre. It was almost like some sort of weird movie cartoon thing. And I dealt with him, and I tried not to. I tried to get him. I did get him out early, but I didn't even want to take him. But really, yeah. And so that was a very bizarre situation. I've never. We did very well in Afghanistan. The unit did very, very well overall. But I definitely had a lot of personnel issues there.
I can imagine. Yeah. So I was in the National Guard. We were a transportation company, and we ended up doing convoy security in Iraq. But our replacement unit was a bunch of Air Force Reserve guys from every MLS or whatever they used. And they just mashed these poor guys into a transportation gun truck company and put them all in there. And those guys, I mean, they had a hell of a time trying to figure everything out. I can imagine you going in from active duty and dealing with, different languages, and that would be a nightmare, but you guys all made it out.
We did 2 iterations before we even went there. We did 2 iterations of training, storming, norming, performing, and trying to get, but yeah, it was just a bunch of, but people that didn't speak English and they were civilians. They're trying to become, active duty. They knew their stuff. It's just, they couldn't form a team, and they had all their individual Spanish things. A Cuban and a Puerto Rican, they're like, boom, boom, and boom. You got a Mexican over here doing this. And, I don't speak Spanish and I don't know all the nuances, but there was like little racism and cults within their little division.
At least cook good food for you guys.
Well, so, we had the dining hall in Afghanistan was pretty much ran by Indians and Pakistanians. So we had good food over there. And so we didn't really need to go out and cook much because we were on a FOB, a forward area base. It was Shindan, Afghanistan. I was in charge as a commander of 18 camps in RC West, Region Command West of in Afghanistan. And my soldiers would go from base to base on helicopters doing inspections, sanitary inspections of all the different hubs in that region. For the most part, it was just getting bombed 3 to 4 times a week and just indirect fires that were not really accurate. No one died. No one got injured. I did see, they had some IEDs off the FOB, and I did see it Humvee. None of my soldiers died, but I saw some soldiers die in a FOB and right outside the base, right outside the FOB. It just blew the Humvee to smithereens. And mostly we were just doing alarms, just running to the bunkers when the incoming came, which was not much, 4 to 5 times, 3 or 4 times a week, I guess. So that was that. And overall, they did their, I just had to keep them out of fighting each other. But overall, they did pretty well, and for the mission and so forth,
Well, I mean, even having incoming, you never know when it's coming. That'll give you a little bit of PTSD for sure. You know, there was a lot of guys we had who never left the base. They were the mechanics and working on the vehicles and stuff, but those poor bastards were always waiting to get hit by something, you know, and shit would get close or hit people, unfortunately. So even being on the base will you see some shit. So how you were in Afghanistan and then came back from that. How long after your deployments and everything did you stay in the military? How long have you been out?
So I went to Afghanistan pretty much as a senior person. I was a lieutenant colonel. And when I come back of Afghanistan, I consider Afghanistan my premier, like, you know, like you win the Super Bowl type of job. Yeah. I was a commander and I did the combat tour. And that was really my only combat tour as a senior person. I come back, you know, get the Bronze Star, which, you know, anybody can get as long as you have the rank. And then I go to Germany and they gave me any assignment I wanted to. It's kind of like that secret handshake. It's like, you know, whatever you want. And I went to Germany to retire. I had already been burned out. And really, you know, a lot of people look at PTSD as Afghanistan, but I really look at it at the run-up accumulation of events before Afghanistan. I had post-traumatic stress syndrome really 2 to 3 years before Afghanistan with a toxic work environment, which I wrote an entire book about, wicked workplaces. And I would rather be in Afghanistan to have to deal with a toxic boss. And then my father died, and then that's stressful. And then you go into Afghanistan, and then you're not really dealing with the stress, and really the build up. And then once I come back from Afghanistan, I was totally done. I was burned. I was a walking zombie. But they said, well, you know, we'll give you a chill assignment over at Landstuhl, Germany. Just hang out, pretty much drink beer and hang out and just process out. And that's pretty much what I did. That was my transitional part to end the 31 years, was just transitioning out of Landstuhl. And, you know, so that, you know, the reason I wrote that second book about the veterans' benefits was because when I was there in Landstuhl, no one would help me with the veterans process. And I was like, how? I know I'm supposed to get some benefits and I'm in a really wicked situation. I can't, and I don't want to have to do it. I'm in PTSD. But I figured what I did is I took a long time, like everything else, it takes a long process for me to figure something out. I put the paperwork in, but I learned a whole lot about the process of getting your benefits and I pissed off my supervisor, who was a full colonel, because I would keep going back to these transitional classes, and he didn't like it. He's like, you need to be out. I says, well, I'm transitioning out. You can go ahead and throw me under the bus or throw me a bad OER, but you know, I know my benefit, and there's nobody helping me, and I couldn't. But I went through these classes and I read a lot and I learned a lot. I'm not certified, but I learned a lot, to at least write a book about it and to talk about it. And so I did pretty well, and put my packet in, and I did what the veteran service officer is supposed to do. They didn't want to hit me, but I put it in there and I came out 100%. So I was
perfect.
Yeah.
There you go. And well-deserved. I mean, that's the problem with even the military, not necessarily the VA, even though that's a problem too. I know when we were demobbing out of Iraq, they had us fill out questionnaire, you know, what's wrong with you? And then they said, and if you mark anything's wrong, you're freaking staying, you're not going home. And so everybody's just like, yeah, nothing's wrong. And then that bites you in the ass. You don't even know about it, you know, 6 months down the road when you get out and you didn't check this box, so you obviously didn't have this problem. It's like, no, I had this problem. I just wanted to freaking go home. I was dealing with so much other shit, and they don't really help you. I think it's maybe getting a little bit better with the internet. Guys are kind of learning that, hey, you need to go to sick call if you have a problem, and you need to get this documented, because if it's not documented, they're not going to freaking pay you, or it's going to be very, very hard. I have friends right now, you know, he was a sergeant first class in the National Guard, but he did a lot of active duty time in Bosnia. He, at a bare minimum, has tinnitus, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. And they freaking have denied. And I'm like, I don't know what the problem is with his particular case, but some guys just can't get that, even that initial 10% rating is so hard for some of these guys. And I'm happy you wrote a book about it. You know, so many guys need help.
Yeah. I mean, just tinnitus should be 10%. That's the easiest one to get is tinnitus. And there are just second and third order benefits with a rating. Yeah. You get the paycheck and everybody looks at that, but the thing builds up. It's kind of like putting an investment into a mutual fund or a stock, and it's going to grow over time. Think of it that way. A lot of veterans I see is like, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. I saw one statistic out saying like only 25% of the people veterans are actually getting their benefits. 75% are not getting their benefits. Even if you get a 0%, go ahead and put it into the system, because it's like an investment. It's like a seed in the ground. Things will grow that you don't really understand. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And there are many other benefits to having this other than just money. And it could be healthcare. It could be other benefits. I've got TRICARE and I got VA. I would rather, personally, if I wanted to get healthcare, I would go to TRICARE or anything else besides the outside, because the it's just the way because it's such a bureaucrat. And I'm 100%. So I got the fire, but they are just it's a layered bureaucratic place that you have to work with. Whereas TRICARE or pretty much anywhere else, you can get there quicker and more efficiently. And yeah, I don't care about paying a copay or whatever. That's fine. But there are benefits, and that, I mean, a lot of people that have PTSD are just, they don't want to have to deal with the VA, and maybe they don't even know about it and they don't care about it. Sometimes they don't feel they deserve it because they weren't in combat. And, you know, if you served, you deserve, just like you get Social Security, you served a period of time, years work-wise, eventually you probably deserve Social Security because you served it, the system. And it's not that you deserve it. It's a part of a regulation in the system that, you know,
you've earned. You've earned it. I know a lot of guys who I've served with who initially didn't want to file the paperwork. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. And it's like, brother, you need it more than anybody. You know, it's usually the guys who say they don't need it that need it the most, you know? And yeah, I mean, I'm in the VA system and I've jumped through all the hoops. I help out so many of my friends who, you know, I started early on. Luckily, I've always been good with paperwork and stuff like that. I got out from Iraq in 2004 and I, within 6 months filed and started going through that process. But a lot to learn. If you don't know, man, it'll bite you in the ass. I finally, 20 years later, got, tinnitus that I filed for back in 2005. And it's like, holy shit. They denied it immediately. I'm like, man, I've been home for 3 months, and they asked me, is it in your ear or is it in your head? And I'm like, is this a trick question? I don't know. In my head, they're like, you got PTSD, you don't have tinnitus, get out of here, yeah, it's a process, man. So I saw that it said the Army investigated you and arrested you. Can you talk about that?
The arrests were multiple times, but the investigation. So the arrests were the biggest arrest really, if you get down to it, was as a captain in San Antonio, Texas. I was going to school. I got a driving under the influence, DUI. And we know with conventional wisdom, a DUI, especially for an officer, is a career ender. I mean, I was drinking and driving, but there were some other side stories to it. I went into a restaurant. A police officer was in a parking lot who told me to come out of the restaurant because I felt that he needed help. He had his sirens on. I went out there and then he asked me if I thought I was going to help a police officer being called out of a private restaurant to go. But no, I got a DUI. It was a very weird situation, but I did say, yes, I was drinking, I was driving, and that's my truck. Yes. Cuffed me, stuffed me, sent me downtown. The military police ended up taking me out, and I had to eventually go to see my battalion commander as a captain. I was read a GOMAR, which is a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand. It's a sheet of paper that says, you're done. You're history. You've disgraced the Army. You're the worst. There's no more opportunities of schooling. There's no more promotions. Everything is done pretty much. And that went into my performance file. We call it a fish performance file. And it went in there. And I expected this is the end of my military career as a captain. It was 1995. And really December 1995 coming. And so I felt that I'm done. Some sergeant pulled me aside and says, you know what? There's a regulation to try to appeal it, but it's a long shot. I'm a captain going to appeal some sort of general officer memorandum of reprimand they have stayed on. So I said, well, hell, okay, I'll give it a try. And it took me to, now the embarrassing part was that everybody knows that you're a piece of shit. Yeah. I mean, so everybody says, stay away from this dude. He's done. And so you're shamed in your peer group. You're shamed. You're thrown aside. And I was, and rightfully so. But then again, I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and try to appeal it. It's going to take 2.5 years. And, after 2 years, people start. And I did. And it took a lot of work, a lot of paperwork to say you're worthy to the Army. And they've invested a lot of money. So many people, you had to get so many letters and throw it into the general's appeal process. And he went ahead, lo and behold, he went ahead and lifted it off the performance file. He expunged it from, well, he didn't expunge it. He pretty much put it into my restricted file, which allowed me to go to schools and get promoted. And so I did. And again, it looks like the peers are like, what the hell? I thought he was done. He's a major now. And like, how in the hell did this happen? And so again, I say, I get into the shit and then I get out of it and I just keep on moving. But that's just one example of so many throughout the book.
So is it better to learn and get into the shit or to not get in the shit at all?
Not to get into it at all. And you just learn so much once you get into that stuff and you have to go through it and you learn about once you hit bottom in life, it's hard, it hurts, and you're embarrassed. But if you kind of allow that pain to form and to learn from it, you might be better off. I mean, if you break the doctor says if you break a bone, it grows back stronger. And that maybe in many ways that could happen in your personal life. And maybe just allow that to happen and form those knots and those, when you push iron, you break muscle and that forms up a little bit more muscle. That's part of what I'm thinking that might be happening.
Yeah, you're learning through pain, but you're learning. How long have you been out of the service now?
Oh, 10 years exactly. 2014 is when, and now it's 2024. So it's been 10 years.
And you wrote a book about the VA, navigating that. And are you helping guys on the side, helping them get benefits, or you just wrote the book? Or
I pretty much wrote the book, and I've always helped guys on the side before the book or whatever. People I know or people that come and ask me, I sort of guide them through it. I don't have like a website just for veterans. Like I'm not a veteran service officer, but if people come and ask me, I just give them my services and my advice. And I think I could sum up this one book in just a few sentences, which is get a good veteran service officer, meaning that get someone to represent you that's qualified and is in your best interest. And in Legion, it could be the Disabled American Veterans of VFW. But, you'll just have to ask around and get someone that's good. I didn't have one. That's what the book, and I learned, but that's my best advice for this right here. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't have a VSO either. I've done everything on my own. But yeah, I know a lot of guys that don't know anything about, having letters and that you need, diagnosis, support letters, and all the support.
Yeah. Anything from any medical record. Even civilian, in other words, I've helped people out who had been out of the military for more than 30 years, but they have a lot of civilian records that connected to the military. In other words, they had some military issues, medical, but then put all the medical records that you can, civilian or otherwise, and allow that veteran service officer to, you give your taxes to a tax person if you have a business, you give veteran service stuff to the veteran service officer if you've got them. Buddy letters, witness letters, any of that paper. They love paper. Push the paper, man. Push it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you dealt with some PTSD obviously before and during with your father, and then after. I have also dealt with that. What kind of stuff have you done? Have you done anything to improve that on your own? And if so, what kind of stuff have you done, and what would you recommend to other guys?
If you can find like a camp or a foundation that will allow you to experiment with the different methods. So a lot of times when you go to PTSD, you go to a restaurant to eat, and then there's a menu of things. But I look at PTSD as there's a menu of options to try. You need to try. You don't know. I've never been to this restaurant. I don't even know there's a whole, if you can find a camp, oh my gosh, what's the guy in Texas down in Houston? There's a PTSD camp. There's a foundation named Marcus Luttrell, Lone Survivor Foundation.
Yeah.
He wrote that book and he has the movie Lone Survivor, but he has there's all these different methods. It doesn't have that. Meditation, it could be brain stimulation, it could be riding a bike, physical activity, it could be yoga. So you have a whole lot of things. Of course, there's drugs. I don't really like the drugs, but that you might like them. But I sort of want to stay away from that. But I like the natural things. So you just go through and just see what works for you. Underwater basket weaving. There's all kinds of things that you might want to try. And it really is from A to Z, things that you can try. And if it's really that bad, you will try them. And I have tried many of them. And, what works for me is physical fitness activities, sauna, the ice bath, the contrasting effect of going from heat to cold and that shocking effect. That really helps me out a lot. My dogs, I've got 3 dogs. The nature, being out in nature, being out of the city and out of the loud noises. That helps me, but what helps me may not help you. So I would say, just again, like when you look at the VA, when you look at PTSD, there's a lot more to it, and just give things a try and see what your doctor may suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've gone to the VA, started going there right away. They put me on medication, and I tried, 7 or 8 different SSRIs, and that didn't do anything except make it worse, honestly. And then just going to the VA for their group therapy or something, that gave me more PTSD than every time I drive in there, it's just, you get more and more anxiety. I mean, I've tried physical fitness and that definitely helps a lot. But really what helped was I did ayahuasca in December and down in Costa Rica. And it was, buddy, it changed my life. I mean, it's the whole reason I'm doing this right now, because I mean, it was like a light switch. I've had a number of traumatic things happen like everybody else in the world, a combat vet, and my brother was killed in a car accident right after coming back from Iraq. And then I was in law enforcement as a reserve deputy for 10 years and had a child that was lost under my care, and just a bunch of terrible things. And it just was going. And I was at my wit's end and was on medication. Finally, my brother-in-law happens to be kind of affiliated with this place. And he said, "Hey man, you should try and give this a try." And I listened to Joe Rogan, and I've heard him talk about, DMT and all this stuff. And so it's like, well, shit, I'll give it a try, and went down there. And I mean, it was the scariest, most healing thing I've ever been through in my life. And I highly recommend it to anybody who's tried everything. Don't make it your first choice, but it's incredible stuff. And so any combat veterans or any people in general, law enforcement that have been through traumatic stuff, if you've tried everything and you need a change, I highly recommend giving that a shot. Psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca, all these things. The VA is even doing a lot of research on like psilocybin now, and they're doing trials with veterans, and it's showing some serious promise. So
I was going to write a note down. Do you have a name of a program that I could just look?
So this place is called Rhythmia Life Advancement Center. It's rhythmia.com, and they're in Costa Rica, and it's a 7-day program. They have yoga and meditation and really nice accommodations. You're not going out into the jungle, That's not for me. Very nice accommodations. And they do 4 nights of ceremony or medicine and therapy, however you want to call it. And, each night is a lot different. The last night is kind of the grand finale, and it's a lot stronger medicine. And boy, it'll knock the PTSD right out of you. I promise. It's incredible stuff. I went in December. I went again in July because like all that stuff was resolved, but I'm like, man, what else can I learn? How, and so my second time was definitely not as life-changing, but it was still a very incredible experience.
So, I mean, could it knock you into the person that you used to be, or did it make you a different person?
I think I don't really know, because my entire life, my parents listen to this, but my entire life has had a lot of trauma in it. It really has. I mean, just rough upbringing, rough childhood. And then it was just join military at 17. And it's been a shit show for a long time, and I think it made me the person that I've always been or always wanted to be, but I don't think I ever would have gotten there without this. I know I wouldn't have. I mean, all the therapy in the world, I've done it. Nothing has been as incredibly life-changing as this. And it's not a placebo effect. I mean, it's night and day. I mean, I came back and my wife was like shook because it's immediate. And obviously life happens and new things, new problems arise and stuff like that. But you handle it better because you're not dealing with all the bullshit that you were carrying around from the past. And so, yeah, man, if you know anybody out there who's really going through it, I highly, highly recommend it. There's other places that do it. There's Ibogaine and Bufo and all these other psychedelics that are out there. I don't know anything about them, so I can't speak to them, but I know a lot of these alternative, they call them alternative, but they were around before all this other stuff, so they're finding some really good success with this.
Yeah, I'm writing. Also, I've done many podcasting, and I'm talking and I'm writing and I'm expressing and just getting the heart out, just like you're doing right now. That's a part of my therapy as well. And saying what the hell I think about things without any filters. That really helps me out. And so I've done a number of podcasts and written the books, and then I've done the audio books. Those help me out as well, because you got to repeat and repeat and repeat. And eventually after you do that, things get processed.
Yeah.
But that's about the rhythm. I'll put that in the back of my head here in case somebody talks about it.
Well, everybody I mentioned it to, and I've mentioned it to a handful of people, and they've gone down and have experienced it, and they have found the same benefits as me. I mean, I have a family member who dealt with some serious childhood trauma and carried that for 40 years. And I mean, it straightened him out, man. It's crazy. It rewires your neural pathways, and, I'm not a doctor, but does a lot of incredible stuff. So highly, highly recommend it. So what are you doing these days?
So I'm pretty much continuing the podcasts, and I'm writing a third book about, it's not popular to talk about, but it's about white poverty. We call it white trash. It was trash or what have you, but there has been some very good books in the past written about white trash. And no, I'm not advertising this book, but it's called White Trash. It's a New York's best. It's not my book, but it's something I'm studying. So what I do before I write a book, my father came from white trash. In the first book, I talk about white trash, and that kind of formed my, grit in many ways. And he was white trash. He had a white trash upbringing, and he told us to stay away from poverty and things of that nature. So what I do is before I write a book, I try to study things and get a little bit more, and then I interview people, and then I throw things out. It's a really creative. Another book is called Not Quite White. So what I'm trying to say is so it's a creativity zone that we go into. I don't know what the name of the book's going to be, really. We've been doing it for 5 months, and it'll probably go on for another 7 months. So that's the process of a book and how you approach it. It could come out a little differently than what I'm talking about right now. So that's kind of my fourth book. Is I do speaking events and podcasting. If you need a speaking and motivating person to go and talk to people, I'm willing to do that. And so that's kind of what my plans are and what I'm going to in the future. Yeah.
Right on. So the 3 books you've written, any of them in audio yet?
Oh yeah. So I've got audio. my voice. I am the narrator. I am the author, which is really different. I mean,
I like that.
A Soldier Against All Odds is my narration, is my voice. It ain't perfect, but it's I mean, it's, it's me that wrote the book, and you'll feel the emotions with me. Now, out of the the veteran self-help guide, this right here is just a self-help guide, and I've got a lot of links in there. It's best to get it on Kindle, and so you can link into the sites. That's not audiobook. But this one right here, Leading Through the Crossfire, Toxic Leadership. Out of my 31 years in the Army, I'm going to tell you right now, toxic leadership was my word. This is audiobook too. And I've got a lot of other veterans talking about how they've been thrown under the bus and just screwed with by management. And so I talk about that, and I'm the narrator author, and that was my last book. I just did it a few months ago. I just published that a few months ago. But the most popular book really is the first book, is A Soldier Against All Odds, because it seems like everybody identifies with just fucking up. So
Absolutely. I'm going to download that one and listen to it tomorrow. So a guy or gal thinking about joining the service these days, what advice would you give them?
It's pretty much the same thing across the board. It doesn't matter if you show up at the right place, the right time, with the right attitude, and you're above 50%. And so the right place, right time, and just showing up at a little bit before you're supposed to show up, because you can make some personal contacts and do some cross-talking and get to know some people. So show up a little earlier. And then, because let's say you don't know a damn thing, and you're like me, 17 years old. But if you're showing up at the right place, trying to do your best, the right attitude, you're doing better than 50%. That's my advice on that.
I like it.
That's cool.
Right on. Well, sir, I appreciate your time. You got anything else you'd like to share with anybody out there?
Oh, I'm really, my website is jasonpike.org, jasonpike.org. That's my website. You'll find all the books, all the social media handles on there, and the blogs that I put out. That's where you find me.
I sure appreciate your time. I'm going to get this one fired off for the masses so they can hear your story and go out and get Jason's book. I really appreciate it.
All righty.